member of the Narrowing Gliding Club, and I went down to talk to Alan Hockridge one day, and he was sitting at a table, and I looked along it, and there were 20 members of the Narrowing Gliding Club sitting at this table just there in the centre. So numerically, they're the strongest individual club membership of this organisation, and it's something I'm proud of because I was a founder member of it too. Now, when Roy Hamilton died, we were so fortunate to get Brian Hernan to take his place. The thing that we both noticed is the depth of friendship that comes from the floor of the meeting towards us, and we're very well aware of it, and we're very appreciative of it, and we want to thank you very much. That's Brian and I. And I just want you to know that on this special occasion for me. The other aspect is Stan Sher's role, and also how pleasing it is to see so many overseas members, and surprising a lot of them, perhaps not surprising because it's only next door, from South Africa. One of my closest friends is Ray Villerman, who was the senior captain with TAA Australia, and he and I started the air tours to Southern Africa that provided many people with the most exciting experiences of their whole lives. And Ray's very active in general aviation in Queensland, including running air shows like the one at Bundaberg, and the numbers, quite a few of them would have been to those shows, particularly Bundaberg. Excuse me. We've also welcomed many senior retired Air Force officers to our meetings, like Air Vice Marshal Hitchens, and recently Air Vice Marshal Weir came up and introduced himself, and it's very pleasing to have those people come up and tell us what a wonderful organisation this is and how much they've enjoyed being there. And I say, well, we're looking forward to getting something like this going in the eastern states. These distinguished people are all retired on that east coast, and Ray and I often talked about starting a similar organisation over there, but the opportunity has to be created and taken advantage of. And since our last meeting, I had a phone call from Steve Rogers, who wanted to come down to the Rafa estate where I live at Mandurah and do an interview about my aviation background. And I thought, well, that won't take very long. But in actual fact, he was mainly wanted to come down to see what we could do about getting this set up on the internet and things like that, so that more and more people knew about it and knew what a wonderful organisation it is, and whether more could be started in other places, because if this is what happens when something is so good, inevitably it will start up. And what I particularly want to mention is that we all know how good West Australians are in starting up something that the eastern states hasn't thought of, and that'd be true, wouldn't it? Yeah. A great example are the Rafa villages, which were started by returning Air Force people after the war. Now, my wife and I live in one at Meadow Springs, and it would have to be as good as any in Western Australia, if not Australia. Now, I quickly became aware that Steve Rogers is a chemist, and he had the knowledge to do wonderful things as far as our old Fliers group is concerned, both for our members and to expand the concept through the internet. And I could see that the best way was for me to step down so he could influence you all on how we could expand it both here and other places. And living in Perth is a definite advantage in his case because he comes from quite close to here, whereas I live in Mandurah. That's all I want to say now. I want to hand over to Steve Rogers.
Boy, didn't that come as a shock. I thought this guy would go on forever. At 86 years of age, and still as young and got all these faculties. Me, I'm not so sure. But it has come out of the blue. Not that I'm... my feelings are rather mixed. I feel like the best man at a wedding. I know there's a job of work here to do. I know I'll have a good time, but maybe not as good a time as the groom. Who amongst us wouldn't appreciate the amount of effort that Brian John has put in the founding of this organisation 10 years ago, the absolute stunning effort to make every meeting happen, and with such an illuminating bunch of presenters. These things just don't happen by chance. There's people behind the scenes that are really making this work. So no amount of thanks can really cover this situation. We will recognise Brian's efforts a little later in the hour. But for the moment, all I can say is we should put our hands together and recognise a stunning man. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's been a great pleasure.
For my part, my role is very simply this. I will be the bookends, the beginning and the end of meetings. I will give as much support to Brian Hernan, Stan Schur, not forgetting the boys in the bar there, Ron Griffin and John Ridgway, and for those guys that are behind the scenes who put out the tables and chairs, who make these things happen. And that's my role, pure and simple. I don't have the wealth of aviation history that Brian has had. I'll admit now to 200 hours. It's a bit of a shock, isn't it? I got my licence in 1968, so I don't do much flying. But I'm encouraged that Bert Rutan, the aeronautical engineer who we most know about, acquired 2,000 hours in his career. The reason he didn't fly so much, he said he didn't want to be killed in a GA accident. I pretty much feel the same. So that's why I did only 200 hours. So if you're going to criticise me, you'll criticise me for the fact that I have a lack of experience and a lack of appreciation of the things that most of the people in this room have gone through in their working lives. I do qualify for the fact that I am old. I have been a pilot, so that there's two of the criteria down. But I also have a great understanding of being immodest here, but of technology and the way to harness technology to make things happen. And I'm talking specifically about putting the material that we have for the old Fliers, which is such a wealth of material, onto a medium where it can be watched by a greater number of people. It's okay that we get 120 people along to these meetings, but the world contains how many billion people, how many billion pilots, how many people interested, how many people like to donate to a cause like us? Well, have we got a mechanism in place for that to happen? You betcha. So my role is as I described before, and also to progress the organisation, and I thank Pat Moran for providing me with so many DVDs, for Stan Schur the same, and for all the presenters who allowed their material to go on the internet. It's a pretty brave thing that you've done. To date, we've had 3,500 hits, and 181 hours of our videos have been watched by other than those in the group, so there is interest out there. Just two things in closing this little segment. For those who know Doug Windsor of Young, New South Wales, he's just done his 100th Angel flight, and he's to be applauded for that. We welcome Rick Seeger along here, who's giving the talk today, and thank you for that, Rick. And finally, a note on parking. Thank God we got some free parking today, but down the strip a bit, I saw the parking inspector chatting to a chap, I think he was Irish, and he said, "Look, mate, there's two yellow lines there, you can't park there." He says, "Begorra be damned, I can. Look, it says, fine for parking." It was pretty good, wasn't it? So at this stage, I'll hand over to Brian Hernan, and once again, Brian John, thank you very much. You are an amazing man. Thank you.
It might be an appropriate time to present Brian John with life membership of this organisation. So on behalf of us all here, Brian, would you like to accept that life membership for being our founding member, the man who got the show on the road? Look, I mentioned a few minutes ago, Hal Sutton was standing over there, the tears rolling down his cheeks. Well, mine are on the edge of running down my cheeks too. I can't thank you enough. That's all I'll say.
By the way, that was a suggestion from Stan Sherman, the man behind the camera over there, who's put in an enormous amount of work and a lot of good ideas as well.